Hi, so this is my reply after watching the video Mastering Communication, Differences and Emotional Strategies in Discussion, Dialogue, and Debate. So, after having watched the video, I came to the conclusion that three of the biggest lessons that were offered, at least to me in this video, were the importance of framing your communication by targeting it to a specific audience, whether that be in the workplace, in the educational system, just one-on-one conversations, or in smaller groups, and trying to shift more from the debate and discussion styles of speaking towards dialogue. And in order to do this, we were told to raise our own awareness of how we speak to others and how others speak to us. So some questions that I wrote down that are really important to ask yourself while you're talking to somebody else is, am I truly listening to what they're saying with an open mind? And am I hurting this relationship in any way by the way that I respond to others? The big question that I heard that we should ask during these kinds of conversations is, how might this be true? Or what about what this person is saying is true? And lastly, another big lesson that I had learned was to take a yes and mentality, where no matter what kind of conversation style you take on, whatever is thrown at you, you kind of acknowledge in a positive light and try and continue the flow of the conversation. So if I were to try and explain these main points of this video to a 6-year-old, I would probably start off by saying how important it is to monitor the way that you speak to others. I think the easiest way to do that would be to bring up the golden rule. Treat others how you would want to be treated. So I know that personally when I was young, a lot of the times I would try and argue with my friends to get my point across. And in those situations, I was always told, hey, let's try that in a more positive outlook. So I think the way that I would try to explain that to a 6-year-old is to tell them, depending on whether you're with your friends, with your parents, with your teachers, always try to be aware of your emotions and be aware of when you're upset, and just try to keep your emotions and your mindset as positive as possible. If I were to ask those closest to me to identify my predominant communication style, I think it would depend on who you talk to. I will admit that with my parents, they would likely say that currently I use, or at least I try to use, the dialogue communication style the most. But growing up, especially with my mom, who was my guardian and my primary caregiver, I was trained to use the debate communication style a lot, given that she and I were constantly butting heads over everything, and she would always try to get her point across to me, and me being like the headstrong, like teenager that I was, would always try to fight back and try to prove my own point. But since I'm growing now and I'm maturing and I'm learning, I try to keep an open mind even when all of these like arguments get tossed my way. So rather than trying to get my own point across now, I try and validate other people's opinions and just say, I understand like what you mean, and I'm glad you told me. So with that being said, I think my biggest habit that I would change based off what I learned in this video today is probably my consistent need, like in the back of my head, to get my point across, especially when I feel as though I'm not being heard. So I really like this idea of raising awareness, and just asking yourself, not necessarily out loud, am I listening with an open mind? Am I hurting this relationship, or is there a possibility that I could hurt it? And just making sure that my answers to those questions are in tune with the way that I would want to be treated. So I really like at the end of the video, they talk a little bit about ways that you can make sure that you're keeping like a positive communicative situation. So one of the things that I heard that I'd like to take in for myself was, when you find that emotions are running high and that this conversation is one that you can no longer continue without essentially turning it into an argument, to just step back for a second, take a few deep breaths, and make sure that your emotions are in check before going back in and inserting yourself into said conversation is an incredibly important idea that I would like to continue taking in for myself and hopefully be able to master. All in all, I did learn a lot from this video, and I hope to take the lessons that I learned from it and bring them up into action in my own life. Perfect.